Well, we've come from hollow to hilltop. Looking up at that, it's a massive, just absolutely massive rock escarpment. Not really sure what I was expecting, but this reminds me a lot of parts in western Mass. I'm in kind of a little depression here between, like in a what would you call it, cathedral of rock faces, and the plant that we're here to see, still in Connecticut, by the way. If you saw whatever I would have put up last, is this diminutive little guy right here. This is yet another Asplenium. My newfound obsession is Asplenium ferns. This is Asplenium montanum, another obligate lithophyte, another spleenwort, another plant that is exceedingly rare, or at least unobserved. In fact, I'm looking up now. You can see them right up there on top of going up the rock face too. They're not just underneath. But one that is rare in New England. This is the southern affinity one. So this is endemic to the eastern, I want to say eastern US, but it might just be eastern North America. This is a plant that we will find running down the spine of Appalachia, just barely petering out in a handful of locations in New England. In Massachusetts, it occurs in Mass, but I came down here because I think the only 2 or 3 Massachusetts populations are all on private property, so notoriously difficult to get access to. This one here, it's a little bit more abundant in Connecticut in general, especially Western Connecticut, but this one here, is relatively easy to get to, and it's beautiful habitat, as you can see. So Asplenium montanum, one of the spleenworts, you can see, got the story right there. Notorious for typically having their elaborate, very elaborate, very beautiful fronds. Story on these things, fairly distinctive. Typically like in lines rather than like little dots like you would see maybe like a Polypodium, which can have a similar habit and a lifestyle to this. No clue what type of rock this is. Maybe some sort of metamorphosed sedimentary rock, but I would just be guessing. I can always look it up after and put it put it with the what you call it there, put it in the subtitles. I'm gonna make this a quick one just because I'm not really feeling it today. Spent a long time at the last spot I was at, only found 1 of 2 target species, and now where I'm at here, even though that this is public land, it's not exactly a hiking area. And I'm always just paranoid someone's going to give you a hard time, because God knows you don't have to be on private property for somebody to accuse you of being on private property. So we'll probably, make this a, one of those like 10-minute or so episodes. But I try not to bash people over the head with the fern-centered content. My little camera GPS thing crapped the bed, specifically the cable did. It's the 3rd one of those I've gone through, broken the car. Wasn't really feeling like going to the rhododendron paracliminoides spot I had, just because that's a similar type thing to this and to where I was, where it's like, I know it's fine, but I'd rather save the argument. So Asplenium montanum, like many of the Aspleniums, it's going to have some very specific rock chemistry that it's going to want to work with. Can't just grow this thing anywhere. Like, seems to like the underside of rocks. I mean, most of the Aspleniums do. Trichomanes, I've covered plenty. That one's fairly abundant. Ebony spleenwort, that's the only one that you'll see, maybe not coming out of soil, but it'll be flat on the ground. It won't be, on a rock face. Hopefully you can actually see the depth here, that this is actually, curved in. And then Asplenium rhizophyllum is the one that's famous because it'll take the end of its fronds. It's actually the one that doesn't have, the New England one, that doesn't have the segmented foliage, but it'll take its leaves, and the tips of those fronds will root themselves into different places along the rock face. That's an obligate calciophile. Some of them only grow on trap rock. Some of them only grow on, super calcareous rock. Some of them only grow on acidic rock. I think you get, let's see, Trichomanes, rhizophyllum, get this species, Asplenium montanum, Asplenium viride, and then Ruta muraria, which is the one I would have made a video on a couple videos back, which I believe Ruta muraria, unlike this species, which is like endemic to the US, or at least, endemic to Eastern North America, Ruta muraria is a really common species in Europe, to the point where it's actually considered a weed. Grows in on brick walls, and can be kind of a burden. Just highlighting the difference between, the predominant geology of the predominant geology of eastern New England, of eastern North America, the predominant geology of much of Europe, of course. You know, you go Scotland, Ireland, there's a lot of overlap in geology between, especially, you know, like the Canadian Maritimes and northern New England and, you know, Western Europe. But by and large, a lot of calcareous rock in Europe, and there's a lot of acidic rock here in eastern North America. So that's Asplenium montanum. I mean, sorry, I don't have any more, you know, smart quips or anything. I don't know. Some days you're just not feeling it. Happy I did at least get. I would have been really, really bummed if it wasn't for the finding Corallariza trifida. Go back to the last video, check that out. But the you know, some days you just wander around, you feel like you're just kind of intruding. I hate that feeling. It's part of imposter syndrome, even though, to my knowledge, this has been documented in an herbarium specimen, but never, I don't think there's any INAT observations of this particular species from this part of Connecticut. Oh, there's actually a whole bunch of them. Yeah, they're doing well here. Oh, just check that out. Who doesn't love a nice rock face? We'll make this a short one. There's a couple cool things. I saw some lady slippers on the way up. Get those in the video. Actually, well, that would mean that the rock here is predominantly acidic, which would probably mean this is some sort of, I mean, it's definitely metamorphosed and it looks sedimentary and orange. I don't know. Could be circumneutral. Who knows? We'll figure out exactly what type of rock exposure this is, because rock generally has good info on that sort of thing. Again, just an incredible habitat to come down into. We'll see if we can refine those lady slippers and talk about one or two other things, but really, this was just a stop to see Asplenium montanum, the mountain spleenwort. Cool plant, cool habitat, cool life story to it. Yeah, man, this reminds me a lot of Western Mass and northern New England with the boulder caves. I can hear water down in here. I'm guessing it's around, I can see it coming out around the corner there. There's a creek behind me that disappears, so it must be popping out. I should have come up this way. This is actually a different way out than we're going to have had come in. So you might see a couple different things, but we'll see what we see. Oh man, look at this. This is like almost like kettle holing through here. More Asplenium. But this is, that's where I was just standing and the water's coming down through these rocks. Look at this. Almost kettle holing. This is definitely some sort of metamorphosed rock. I'm really curious to find out. Can't imagine it's anything too calcareous or, you know, too strong one way or the other. I'd have to look and see what the affinities of Asplenium montanum are. But so as of right now, I'm going to guess probably circumneutral. It's probably right around pH of 7. Definitely not. I mean, I guess it could be like a schist or a gneiss. I don't know. This is why I talk to people who know more about geology than me. It's also hard to tell when you've got, you know, moss. Geology is easier in the western states where it's drier, less vegetation covering everything, less moss covering everything. It's hard to tell in some circumstances out in the east, but still, we have a ton of cool geology. I've really been kind of hoping to hammer that home so far this season with videos. Yeah, I made reference to a Polypodium. Here is a Polypodium, Polypodiaceae. Even though it's also, you know, likes growing on rocks, it does not nearly have the same level of affinity to growing on rocks as a lot of the Aspleniums do. It'll grow on like literally a rock, not necessarily a cliff face. In fact, you usually see it most often like up on top of a nice like glacial erratic or something. And then I talked about having it soary in dots rather than lines, and that's what I meant right there. Those are the spores. Probably should have explained soary or just clusters of sporangia. Sporangia are the organs that produce spores, and spores are what ferns use to produce the gametophyte stage of their life cycle. So when you're looking at a fern, like an actual fern frond or a collection of fern fronds, you are looking at the what is known as the sporophyte. So flowering plants do this all in one. I think conifers do this all in one too. You don't see the gametophyte. Ferns would produce a very, very small gametophyte that would release a sperm and an egg. That sperm would go fertilize the egg, and then that fertilized zygote, I guess, is what grows into the sporophyte. Sporophyte then does its own form of genetic recombination, puts the makes sporangia, puts the spores out, and the life cycle continues on. They have two fundamental stages of life. They have this sort of free-living sporophyte stage, then they have a very small, a little guy. they have a small gametophyte stage that's using sperm and egg for reproduction. When it comes to like flowering plants, like this beech tree here, or is this a beech tree? No, this is a massive, massive witch hazel. Nice. Still a flowering plant though. Amanus virginiana. Very, very common down here in Connecticut. This one's got a cool, this one's got a cool gall on it. I wonder what makes galls on Amanus virginiana. Lots of things. This doesn't hurt the plant. If you see a plant like this, especially in your yard, leave it alone. Don't do anything. That's some insect that's dependent on it for its life. And very, very often, more often, 99 times out of 100, unless it's some sort of invasive insect, the galling insect is not gonna hurt the plant. But the plant serves, doesn't harm it at all. Doesn't do anything, and the plant just serves to, promote. Got a bug up my nose. Promote the life cycle of that insect. Anyway, what we're talking about is fern reproduction. Good episode to actually kind of recap on this. So your spore-bearing plants are your ferns, which are also tracheophytes. So sperms. That's what I was gonna say. Ferns produce. Actual plumbing in their tissue. Like they can transport water through their tissue, and they reproduce by spores. Lycophytes, I should say. So your lycopodiums, your dendrolycopodiums, your selaginella, your isoetes, they are also reproducing via spores, and they're also tracheophytes. However, I believe that their spore anatomy is like really, really different than ferns' spore analogy. Ferns are technically, quote, more evolved than lycophytes, but that's neither here nor there. And then below that, you have your bryophytes, like your mosses, your liverworts, which are also, still doing spores. However, they're not tracheophytes. They don't have internal plumbing in their tissue to basically pipe water from the substrate up into their vegetative bodies. Yada yada yada. So that's why they basically need to stay in areas that are nice and moist. But most of them, especially like selaginella and some mosses, are really adept at just basically going dormant, drying out. They can tolerate, in the same way that they need near constant drip irrigation to stay active, they are actually, on the flip side, some of the most drought adapted, one of the most drought adapted lineages of plants in the world. Maybe not this specific species, because this is, growing in a mesic, very wet and shaded New England woodland, but, some of the species out west, and even some of our selaginella here, are like Selaginella rupestris. They can dry out, pretty substantially before they do any real harm, and they just perk back up the second they get some moisture. So it's a little bit of fern anatomy. I figured I'd shoehorn that in there just because I don't know why. It's something about this part of Connecticut. It's really, you're really out in the boonies here. It's how do I describe it? So rural New Hampshire, you get a lot of conservative people, but that's my people. That's my family. I know that rural New Hampshire, live free or die. They're stoned rednecks. You know what I mean? I know how to speak that language. I've been, caught on property in New Hampshire, and it's fine. That's where I'm from. I speak the language. Massachusetts is easy. Anywhere in Massachusetts, I'm not worried about it. Vermont, not worried about it. Just a bunch of armed hippies. But Connecticut, I don't know. A lot of these, it's very yuppie. They're barely even New England, in my opinion. Where we are here, we're closer to Rhode Island than we are to New York. But still, it's rural, but it's everyone's paying a little too much attention to what you're doing. It's the wealthiest state in the country per capita, I believe. It's not trustworthy. In the rural areas, something feels very evil about rural Connecticut. I mean, again, Blair Witch Project, lots of kind of an underrated spooky lore. Massachusetts has that too, but I'd like to believe that Massachusetts in its own way has confronted its demons. The Red Sox drought for almost 100 years, and then the infamous Titletown drought in the late 80s and 90s is the repentance we paid, for our sins. And I swear to God, you're probably going to be watching this video after the NBA Finals, but I swear to God, if the Celtics blow Game 3 tonight, is going to be problems. So, anyway, back up there is from whence we came, and we're going to keep chugging along. Again, something very, very unsettling about the forests of Connecticut. Beautiful, but unsettling. And none of it's in flower, obviously, but this is all a nice little patch of Erythronium americanum. And just like I've seen areas north of here, but not necessarily east, it doesn't really have a lot of the modeling that it typically does. This is colloquially known as yellow trout lily, Erythronium americanum. You know, blooms really early, like April, so we're a little bit past due. But I never see, you know, many of the fruits on them either. Then again, this is a species that forms massive colonies. Like it's all underneath all this. I believe. What fern is that? Dryopterus. I'm not too sure. One of the wood ferns. But you know, you'll see hundreds, if not thousands, of them with maybe a dozen flowering at a time, and I'm not sure why that is. They reproduce superclonally. I'm not sure if it's like multiple leaves. Could be with one plant. They're, you know, true lilies in the family Liliaceae, you know, rather closely aligned with that core lily subfamily. But actually, wait, are they? No, I'm thinking of Clintonia. Clintonia is the weirdo that's related to cucumber root, produces a berry instead of a capsule. Very odd for lilies, which we saw today in the previous video. Just, you know, not that one's not yet in flower. Of course, everywhere here, Connecticut, you guys get a ton of just a ton of Trillium erectum. It was cool to see that green one earlier. These ones are closer to being done. Pretty soon it'll be just, you know, Trillium's just over, you know what I mean? And then I'm not sure what the phylogeny is on all the. I think undulatum blooms a little bit later than this one. I haven't seen undulatum this year, but I saw it where I saw. Oh, we're gonna end up with some nice. We're gonna figure out how to get around here in a second. Nice more of those boulder caves down there. I digress. What was I saying? Yeah, I saw Trillium undulatum where I saw Corallorhiza trifida last year. So I was kind of expecting to see that where we saw the Corallorhiza, but no such luck occurred. That's nice. Almost got more of that kettle hole, and you can see some crazy huge, actual fully formed out kettle holes up in New Hampshire, like Franconia Notch. This is a really, really nice area. This is kind of like the same thing that we had. Go back and watch that Clematis occidentalis video, that like rubble pile. Very different. I mean, different type of rock. What was I saying? Different type of rock, but it's still like these stacked, you know, just big slabs of rock that have weathered out of what was probably at one time a much larger rock formation. Either during, you know, interglacial periods knocked these down, or, you know, whatever. It's New England, eastern New England too. This is all pretty. Actually, I mean, technically, you could make an argument this is like central New England, but whatever. We're getting into semantics there. Just know that, you know, the geologic history of New England is as complicated and old as it is relatively simple and new. You know, very, very old rock, but some of these exposures and a lot of this rock movement is relatively new. So this is rock that could have been laid down, I don't know, this could be, you know, Taconic, Arcadian, Alleghenian, Greenville, you know, a billion-year-old rock. Who's to say what the actual orogeny was, or orogeny is the wrong word. Who's to say what the actual, you know, I forget the word for when its rock is formed. Orogeny is when mountains are uplifted. There's a different word for when rock is laid down. I digress. There's a strong, there's a very, oh, this is actually a nice sweet birch in front of us, Betula lenta. There's a very long time that has occurred between, that's a nice tree you'll see in habitats like this. Really nice birch. Grows big like Betula allegheniensis. You know, not all birches are ruderal plants. In New England, Betula lenta and Betula allegheniensis can be nice, you know, mature forest species too. I digress. The topography of the region and the age of the rock, there's a big discrepancy there. So glaciation was relatively recent, last, I want to say 3 million years, with a different, you know, there wasn't just one. I mean, the last one was the, you know, the last glaciation receded, I think roughly, you can make an argument, 14,000 years ago. So recently, like during the time of humanity's existence, there was still glaciation happening here. But I mean, that was not one event. There was multiple glaciations that took hold and receded and took hold and receded for the course of like 3 million years. I think broadly in like the Miocene is what you would call that. If I got that wrong, I'll put the correct geologic time period. But it was recent in the grand scheme of things. Absolutely, tens of thousands, tens of millions of years post KT extinction, so post dinosaur extinction. But still, there wasn't just one period of glaciation. It seems to be something, people talk about. Like, oh, when the glaciers were here, well, the glaciers were here, then they were gone, then they were here, then they were gone. It's a pretty good chance that 20,000 years ago, there was nothing here, that this was tundra, this was underneath an ice sheet. So when we talk about, the age of certain New England habitats, the plants up on Mount Washington, realistically, have been there a maximum probably of 15, 14, 13,000 years. Those are relic populations of plants that were historically, like super widespread. And in fact, before they got relegated to, the mountaintops of, the actual alpine zone of New England and New York, they might have been hanging out in areas at lower elevation like this, but that was many thousands of years ago. So I just always like to shoehorn that in because people get really, really anal retentive about like getting populations down to like town, county, blah, blah, blah. Some plants are so small and so cryptic, and some people are so myopic. People will find a plant in areas and then insist that must have been moved there. Again, New England's been picked over many times over, but just remember two things. Plants are not sessile. Their populations fluctuate and move as their habitat and environment fluctuates and moves. Not in the blink of an eye. It takes thousands of years. Not in the blink of an eye. Certainly not in a human lifespan. But, take it with the grain of salt if someone's planting a plant. Like, people will get on you for, like, saying, like, oh, you can't plant. If it's like a S3, S4 species, so not common, but not, like, endangered rare. Oh, hey, you can't plant that there. That doesn't occur in your town. It's never been documented. Well, buddy, what are the odds that it was there, even 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago? It probably got wiped out at some point. The historical record is so spotty, even for areas like New England. I'm not saying go do whatever you want. Definitely, don't be planting like S1, S2. I don't even plant S3 species. Definitely don't give them away. That's actually not, that's not true. I think I might have one or two that I began cultivating them well in advance. I'm not intending to release them. They're gonna basically get stand pots as research specimens. But like my yard and the stuff that I give away to people, the stuff I grow for other people to plant, those are all common enough species. S5. And I have species that aren't even native to New England, technically, planted in my lawn, because who knows, at one interglacial period in the past, the thing might have jumped the arbitrary boundary between Connecticut and Massachusetts, or between New York and New England. These are human-made boundaries, and I'm really kind of playing devil's advocate here. But, very small rant about that. I don't know, I get frustrated. We should be encouraging people to plant native plants, restore habitat in your yard. It's not like we're talking about like a quarter of an acre at a time. We're not talking about, lay people remediating actual acre upon acre of mostly pristine natural habitat. We're talking about people replacing their lawns with attractive and beneficial native plants. Should be the goal. And I just seen a lot of people like ripping into others just for being like for the simple mistake of, oh, you really shouldn't be planting mayapple. You know what I mean? A species that is technically only native to a handful of counties in the far west of Connecticut, and I think the Berkshire County of Mass, because all of Western Mass is one county. I'm really ranting on this one, but people will plant it like in Eastern Mass. It's been a popular ornamental. It's not going to hurt anything. I really don't think it does. If someone out there is writing a dissertation on how mayapple, Podophyllum peltatum, being planted in shade gardens behind, like I've got it in my house in a shade garden, and I'm not being defensive. If you can actually give me a good argument, I'll hear you out. Anyway, I just think we should be encouraging people to plant native plants. Don't be poaching extremely rare and endangered plants. Don't be fucking up research studies. But you can plant trilliums in your shade garden. You can plant Trillium grandiflorum in your shade garden if you live in Eastern Mass, in my extremely humble opinion. All right, that's like a 7.5 minute rant. The geology here, just telling you, the geology here, beautiful, incredible. We were down in the holler, I keep wanting to say holler, down in the hollow, now we're up on the hill. All right, we'll see if there's any. Yeah, you see what I fucking mean? There's some bad juju in Connecticut. That's very cool. I love boulder caves. You gotta go to Lost River. Go to Lost River, New Hampshire, if you want to see some actually really cool boulder caves. These are not caverns. These are not eroded away. This is just rocks that have been weathered, you know, out of a solid face, broken apart, and just lumped on top of each other. They're not like limestone caverns, like the deep, open, far underground caves. They're just, you know, like piles of rocks that fall on top of each other. The Devil Den. I'm not fucking going in there. I'm not going in there. Huh. Oh, yeah, that's nice. It's a little, you know, little I think it's a shoulder blade. Shoulder blade of presumably a deer. Can't lie. Freaks me out a little bit when I first saw it. I wonder where the rest of him is. I don't see him around. All this actual real horror story here. All this undergrowth you see that's actually like thick. All fucking burning bush. Euonymus elatus. Ugh. Just a terrible plant that was brought over. Here's a young one right here. Opposite leaves. Celastraceae, same family as the dreaded Oriental bittersweet. You see how the stems have those wings there? That's where it gets the epithet elatus. You know, there's some cool, don't get me wrong, there's some cool Celastraceae species that are native to here, but Euonymus elatus and Celastris orbiculatus are not two of them. Let's, oh, that breeze is nice. Let's carry on. Oh, now see, that's nice. That's a comforting friend. Just one of them, unfortunately. This is Thalictrum thalictroides. I got this planted in my garden. Saw a whole huge patch of it. Yeah, those are the fruits right there. Starting to go to seed right there too. He's almost done. He's an ephemeral. Likes the hillside habit. Saw this near Mount Toby. You see, here's a whole bunch of it. It's already gone to seed. Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of it here. Just one little guy still hanging on, catching my attention. Same family, believe it or not, as this Actea, baneberry, both in Ranunculaceae. Although this one actually produces little fleshy fruits. Same heavily segmented foliage. I think within the family Ranunculaceae, these are somewhat distantly related to the Thalictrums. Thalictrum is in the subfamily Thalictroideae, so it's related to like the ruse and columbines. Oh yeah, here you go. Look at this. Those are the flowers for Euonymus elatus. Kind of cool looking. They don't really smell like much. Kind of smell like hay, but you know, whatever. Crappy plant. You just see it just dominates an understory, shades out a lot of these ephemerals because another Thalictrum right there shades all this stuff out. You know, your erythema, it's just choking out the baneberry. You know, give it a few years and it'll you know, complete its job. Luckily, at least it's deciduous, so a little bit of light does get in here at the beginning of the season, but that's not going to help out the later flowering, you know, plants like Actea. I can't tell if it's Polypodia or rubra. There's two species that look almost identical until they go to fruit. Yeah, that's going to do a number. Look at all this. This is all fucking burning bush. Oh, but it looks pretty in the fall. It looks pretty in the fall. Yeah, so do fucking blueberries, man. So do blueberries. This is a ranty episode. We turned the spice up because, you know, I don't know why. I just felt a little bit more at ease once I started to see some familiar faces. Well, never ended up finding refinding Adiantium palmatum or the pink lady slipper, but that's okay. There'll be plenty of opportunities to see those as the season goes on. Rest assured, we will run into Cypripedium McCall. But in any case, I'm gonna cut this one off here. Probably just head back home. I guess I can stop by the Rhododendron prenophyllum spot or Paraclaminoides, whatever one it is. But there's I got a cool folding kayak, so I got big plans for that. I kind of wanted to go test that out back at home in a water body that I know well. So take it easy.